Welcome to Talk Treatises.
It's great to be here.
Today, we are doing something a little different. Usually, on the show, we take a really broad look at these huge movements. Romanticism, the Enlightenment, existentialism. We tend to paint with a pretty broad brush.
Oh, very broad brush.
But today, we're putting that brush down and picking up a microscope. We are zooming in way in on a very specific, very strange, and frankly, a very dark moment in literary and theological history.
We are focusing on a singular point in time. We're talking about April of 1844. And we're looking at a classic work that came out of that moment, a text known as Petite Pome de Nord, or Little Poems of the North.
Right, but here's the catch, and this is what really drew me in. We're not just looking at the poetry itself, we're looking at the whole context around it, the what they call the Chronicles of 1844 that sit right alongside these poems.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where the magic is, really.
It's such a fascinating juxtaposition. When I was reading through the source material you sent over, I was really struck by how disjointed it felt at first. You've got these intense, almost hallucinatory theological stories about Cain and Abel, or, a personified death.
Right.
And they're sitting right next to these journalistic reports about balloon crashes and war in the desert and the deaths of famous sculptors. But the more I read, the more I realized they aren't disjointed at all, are they?
No, not in the slightest. Yeah. And that is really the core of what we're doing today. Our mission, if you want to call it that, is to explore the theological argument that binds all these seemingly random things together.
We want to understand how a balloon crash in Paris and a biblical storm in the book of Genesis are actually telling the exact same story.
It's a story about fragility.
Fragility, yes, and judgment. I mean, the thesis of this work, if we really boil it all down, it's terrifying.
It is. It posits that the physical world, storms, accidents, even the sand of the desert, is not neutral matter. It is a direct manifestation of spiritual realities.
That's a heavy idea.
It's a very heavy idea. It argues that while humanity is busy trying to distract itself with art and fashion and new steam engines, this first storm of judgment is always waiting, just outside the door.
So let's unpack this, because to really understand the poetry, we have to understand the world that produced it. The text paints a very vivid picture of April 1844. What's the vibe, for lack of a better word, of this specific moment in history?
It's a time of incredible tension. I mean, just palpable friction between theology and modernity.
Right.
Yeah, the Industrial Revolution kicking into high-gear steamships, balloons, mass manufacturing. But the mindset of the people, and certainly of this author, is still deeply rooted in a kind of a providential fear.
So it's a world where science is advancing, but God is still very, very angry.
Exactly. And the text opens with a very significant event that sets this tone perfectly. The death of Albert Thorwaldson.
The Danish sculptor.
Correct. And for those listening who might not be art history aficionados, Thorwaldson wasn't just a sculptor. In 1844, he was like the sculptor. He was 74 years old, a living legend, the man who created the iconic Christ and the 12 Apostles.
He was a giant.
A giant. He was the bridge between the classical world of Greece and Rome and the modern Christian world.
And the way the text describes his death, it feels almost scripted. It's so cinematic.
It is. The scene is Copenhagen. Thorwaldson goes to the theater. He walks to his usual seat in the parterre, the pit, sits down in his velvet armchair before the curtain even rises, and he just stops.
Wow.
He falls backward. No struggle, no last words, no dramatic speech. He is there, and then in an instant, he is gone.
It's so abrupt. And the text, it spends a lot of time analyzing his work before it even gets to his death, which just makes the suddenness of it hit even harder. But there's this one specific observation about his art that I found fascinating.
I think I know what you're going to say.
It says his statues of Christ and the apostles display the embarrassment of Protestantism regarding the nudity of its cult.
That is a dense, heavy phrase, isn't it? The embarrassment of Protestantism. Let's break that down.
Please.
The author is looking at the history of the church. When the Reformation happened, Protestantism stripped the altars bare. It got rid of the gold, the incense, the ornate robes, all the visual, clutter of Catholicism.
It wanted a direct, unmediated connection with the divine.
Precisely. But the argument here is that in doing so, it left the church feeling, naked, cold, visually impoverished.
So Thorwaldson's job is to come in and fix that, to put some clothes back on, metaphorically.
Yeah. He attempts to regain that lost majesty through art. He spends 42 years in Rome, almost half a century away from his homeland in Denmark. He's absorbing the pomp of the Vatican, the richness of Italian art. He's trying to drape that grandeur over the austerity of the North.
But the text notes that despite all that time in Italy, surrounded by all these Italian physiognomies and Greek art, he remained completely a man of the North. He couldn't escape his nature. And this is a crucial bit of foreshadowing for the little poems of the North we're about to get into. The text is telling us. You can go to Rome, you can learn the classical forms, you can try to warm yourself with Mediterranean art, but the cold, stern reality of the North, that's your true nature. You can't escape it.
And then the irony of his death. I mean, he spends his entire life carving the divine into marble, making it solid, heavy, permanent, and he dies in a theater, a place of illusion, of make-believe.
Precisely. It just underscores the fragility of all human attempts to capture the eternal. You can carve a Christ that will last for 1,000 years, but you, the creator, you're just a breath away from collapsing in a velvet chair.
Okay, so while Thorwaldson is dying quietly in Copenhagen, the text shifts our gaze to a completely different kind of struggle. We move from the quiet theater to the War of the Desert, the French military campaign in Algeria, the expedition to Biscayne. Yeah, this provides the active theological backdrop. If Thorwaldson represents the spiritual struggle of art, this represents the physical struggle of empire. And the description of the landscape here is just, it's haunting.
The tiger skin.
The tiger skin. The text mentions that the ancients compared the Sahara Desert to a tiger's skin.
I loved that image. It's so evocative.
It totally changes how you visualize the map, doesn't it? You have these vast, conny spaces, the sand, that's the skin of the beast. Then you have the black points, the Bedouin villages, the large spots, the oases, and the gray stripes, the mountains.
It's not a passive stage for human history. It's a predator.
It's a predatory animal.
Yeah.
A beast that is waiting to bite. And the text details the expedition of the Duc de Mal moving into this skin.
Yeah.
It's a clash of civilizations, Christian versus Muslim, French versus Algerian. But the text frames it as a clash between man and the earth itself. The Oued El Biad, the White River, comes out of an impracticable gorge. The mountains are described as inaccessible.
It feels like the environment itself is the main enemy.
That is the theological point. The text is building a case that the world is inherently hostile. The French columns are trying to impose order, trying to collect taxes and establish administration, but they are marching across the back of a tiger.
Which feels like it mirrors the poem we'll discuss later, where the earth itself literally turns against Cain.
Exactly. Here, the desert is a place where civilization is trying to impose a grid on something wild and lethal.
And speaking of civilization trying to impose its will, let's talk about technology, because 1844, as it's described here, is a year of just staggering technological hubris.
Oh, absolutely.
The text mentions two specific disasters that feel like they belong in a movie about the dangers of playing God. We have the explosion on the steam frigate Princeton and the crash of Monsieur Krish's balloon.
The Princeton incident is a classic Tower of Babel moment. There's an American warship, the absolute cutting edge of naval technology at the time, screw-propelled, steam-powered, and it carried this massive cannon.
The Peacemaker! You can't make this stuff up.
The irony of the name is almost too much. The Peacemaker. It was the largest naval gun ever built. So they bring all the dignitaries on board, the Secretary of State, the Secretary of the Navy. They want to show off this incredible weapon that will allow man to dominate the seas.
Right, a big demonstration.
They fire it once, and it's magnificent. They fire it twice, cheers all around.
And the third time,
the breach explodes. It kills the Secretary of State, the Secretary of the Navy, and several others. It's a decapitation of the government by its own creation.
Wow. It's the tool turning on the mast.
In the most brutal way possible.
Yeah.
And then you have Monsieur Krish's balloon. This is maybe even more symbolic because it deals with the domain of the divine.
Right.
Krish is an aeronaut. He puts up these massive posters all over Paris. He gathers a huge crowd at the Parc of Monceau. Everyone is there. Papas, mamas, nursemaids, soldiers. They pay their 10 sous or 40 sous to watch.
And the text says they want to see him dethrone Jupiter.
That's the phrase. They aren't there just for entertainment. They're there to see a man conquer the heavens. They want to see humanity rise above its station. But instead of rising,
he crashes.
He doesn't even get that far. The balloon goes up a few feet, hits a horse chestnut tree, tears open, and just collapses.
So he doesn't go to Olympus, he crashes into a shrub. But what's wild to me is the reaction of the crowd. In a modern context, if a stunt goes wrong, people gasp. They worry. Is he okay? You know?
Not in 1844. Or at least not in this text version of it. The crowd is described as inhumane. They scream, "Harrow," which is like an old cry for justice. They rush the balloon, they tear the silk to shreds, they attack the basket. They just want their money back.
The text calls it a cannibalistic time.
It's a savage critique of the public. It shows that beneath the civilized veneer, beneath the changeable silks and the Sunday best, the mob is just as predatory as the desert tiger. They treat the Icarus figure not with tragedy, but with mockery and rage.
It really reinforces this idea that this is a fallen, violent world. So we have a sculptor dying in a theater, a desert that looks like a tiger, a cannon blowing up its own creators, and a balloonist getting mobbed by an angry crowd. And amidst all this, there's a strange little religious incident in Syria, in Latakia.
Yes, the Greek priest who converts to Islam. This just highlights the volatile religious atmosphere of the time. He's excommunicated by his bishop, so out of what sounds like pure vengeance, he converts.
And all hell breaks loose.
Pretty much. The Muslim populace parades him through the streets in triumph. The Christians are attending mass, and the mob attacks the church.
It just shows that religion in 1844 wasn't a private matter. It wasn't about personal spirituality. It was a flashpoint for violence.
Exactly. It was tribal. It was dangerous. So keeping all of that in mind, the violence, the hubris, the fragility, let's drop the needle on the main event. Petite Pome de Nord. The first part is titled The First Storm.
And right off the bat, the text gives us a view of the earth that is, well, it's completely unfamiliar.
This is a view of the pre-Lapsarian world, the world before the fall, or more specifically, before the first violent crime. The text describes the early Earth as a perfect sphere. Its curves were perfectly equal, but the most striking detail is the atmosphere.
Yeah.
It was enveloped in a fluid of blue.
A blue fluid, so not air as we know it.
The text calls it an azure fluid.
Yeah.
It explicitly says that vapors hadn't yet escaped the waters to obscure the sky, so there were no clouds, no rain, no storms. The planet was just enveloped in this calm, uniform blue stasis.
So no weather channel needed, it's just blue all the time.
Just blue. And this is the core theological argument. Yeah. The storm is not a natural phenomenon. It's not just low pressure and humidity. It is an invention. It is a modification of the planet's entire operating system.
And the catalyst for this update is Cain.
Cain's crime.
Yeah.
The murder of Abel. The text presents the physical alteration of the planet, the birth of wind, clouds, rain, as a direct cosmological response to that first murder. It's not just that Cain feels bad, the atmosphere itself literally convulses in horror.
Let's talk about Cain in this moment. The description is so visceral, he's running.
He is running, head down. And for the first time in the history of the world, water is falling from the sky. He doesn't know what it is. His hair is frozen by it. He's terrified. And he's wearing a sheepskin, a vein spoil, the text calls it.
And the sheepskin is wet.
Wet and heavy. I mean, think about the sensory details here. He's wrapped in the skin of the flock his own brother tended. It's heavy with this new, terrifying substance rain. And the text points out this horrific detail. On the wet wool, there is a stain that the storm cannot wash away.
The blood of Abel.
The blood of Abel.
So he's wrapped in the evidence of his crime, and the sky itself is pelting him with what the text calls blades of water.
Blades of water and lead. It's not a gentle shower. It is a physical assault. It is the phenomenology of divine wrath. It's psychological torture made manifest as physical weather. Cain looks for the forests for shelter, but they seem to recede from him.
He's the marked man.
Right, but not just with a symbol on his forehead, but with an inability to find shelter. The entire universe has become his enemy.
But then he sees something. A cedar tree.
A black, pyramid-like cedar.
This is where it gets really interesting, Lenny. He sees this tree. It looks like shelter. There's a dry circle underneath it.
Yes. The branches extend in a large circle, and inside that circle, the ground is completely dry. The humidity just stops at the edge. To Cain, this looks like mercy. He thinks the Almighty is tired of my misery.
He thinks he's found a loophole in the system.
Exactly. He rushes into the circle. But notice the description of the tree. It's black. Its branches seem torn and burned. Some of its foliage is red and dried out. This is not a healthy, life-giving tree. It's a monument to something very dark.
So he enters the circle. He's dry for a moment, but then
he feels the fetid vapors. He can't breathe. He tries to leave to go back out into the storm he was just fleeing, but his feet are stuck to the ground.
This is the trap.
This is the trap. It's the theological argument that any relief from divine judgment, if it's not granted directly by God, is a trap. Cain sought shelter on his own terms, and what he found was a prison.
And then he hears a noise, a cry of joy from the foliage.
A cry of joy. That is just chilling, isn't it? He looks up and he sees two eyes of fire.
Serpent.
The serpent. But this isn't the slick, whispering tempter of Eden. This isn't the snake that talks you into eating an apple. This is a monster, an executioner. It's described as an enormous serpent.
The text describes it unwinding from the tree like a cable.
It just descends. Cain is paralyzed like a statue. And the serpent doesn't bite him. It wraps around him. It constricts him.
The description of the bones cracking, it's brutal.
It is. His bones cracked under the rings which doubled on his chest. The serpent presses him, wraps twice around his neck, and then once it dominates the human head, the serpent raises its own head proudly and hisses.
And that hiss is the signal.
It's the signal for the finale. The heavens open, lightning flashes, and the first thunderbolt strikes the earth.
So the storm wasn't just weather. It was a setup, an ambush.
It was a targeted assassination. The text concludes, "Thus died Cain, thus was launched the first thunder of Jehovah. The storm was created for him. It waited until he was completely immobilized by the instrument of his sin, the serpent, and then it struck."
That is a heavy, heavy departure from the biblical account where Cain wanders for years and builds cities and has descendants.
It is. This text argues for immediate, crushing, inescapable retribution. It suggests that the physical world, the storm, the tree, the snake, actively conspire to execute the sinner. It's a universe where there is absolutely no hiding place.
Which brings us to the second poem, because if the first storm is about the inescapable nature of judgment, the second poem, simply titled Death, is about the inescapable nature of, well, death. But the tone shift here is absolute whiplash. It's weirdly funny.
It's macabre humor, yeah.
Yeah.
It shifts from the sublime terror of Cain to this bizarre domestic comedy where in a cozy room, a narrator is having dinner with Marguerite.
Who represents life, pleasure, youth, all the good stuff.
Exactly. They are drinking, kissing, having a delicious dinner. It's warm, it's inviting. And then an intruder appears.
Death. But not the Grim Reaper we usually see in pictures.
It is a skeleton, yes. It has a skull, ivory ribs. But the text explicitly calls death a woman.
The only ugly woman who displeases others. That's quite a line.
A biting line. She's draped in this transparent gauze, which is probably mocking the fashion of the day. She has a rusty scythe, and she's there to crash the party.
The narrator's reaction is what I love. He's not terrified like Cain was. He's annoyed. He's basically like, you should have knocked.
He treats death like a rude guest. He says you could have at least shaken the lion's paw that serves as a knocker.
Yeah.
It's a very modern, skeptical reaction. He's trying to use irony as a shield against the metaphysical.
And Death is not having it. She says, "He who jokes before me is cursed." She says she's there for him, not for Marguerite.
Your days are ripe. A very ominous phrase.
So what does the narrator do? He tries to stall for time. He offers her a drink.
The stirrup cup. He pours her a glass of Chambertin.
A fine red wine. And this leads to the central theological proposition of this whole section. Can you bribe death with the pleasures of life?
It's the Eucharist of vice. He offers the wine. Death drinks it. And the text goes into this weirdly physiological detail. The wine warms the marrow of the skeleton. It hears the liquid cascading down the ribs like a brook over pebbles.
That is such a vivid, almost gross image, this sound of wine splashing around inside an empty rib cage.
And it works. The skeleton becomes flexible. Suppleness returned to these bones without cartilage. A dark light begins to shine in her eye sockets.
She likes the wine. She wants more.
She drinks all the Chambertin. Then she demands the champagne.
Of course she does. She's got expensive taste.
And she drinks it all. She throws the glass. She breaks the floor with her scythe. She's getting rattled.
She's drunk. Death is drunk.
And she starts to dance, the dance macabre, but literally. She's twisting, contorting, and she starts to sing.
And the lyrics of her song are the key here. She has a revelation.
She discovers the joy of life. She sings, "Oh, the sweet drink. Never have I known such enjoyment." And then she makes a decision. She decides to quit her job.
She says, "I will melt my scythe.
I will make it into an iron cup where the air will sparkle." She wants to become a tavern keeper. She says, "If my successor comes, I will tell him, 'My friend, drink this wine and laugh with me.'"
This is such a wild concept. The idea that if death actually tasted life, really tasted it, she would defect. She would join the party.
It's the ultimate romantic fantasy, right? That art, wine, and pleasure are stronger than the grave. That we can seduce our own mortality.
The text doesn't let that happen, does it? The universe has safeguards.
It does. This is where the divine correction comes in. The universe cannot tolerate a derelict death.
So what happens?
She gets too drunk. She gets dizzy. She sees sparks. And then the earth opens up beneath her.
Just like it did for the balloonist in a way. Gravity always asserts itself.
She falls, sprawling like a drunkard. Her scythe falls with a clang. The narrator and Marguerite think, great, we've won, let's grab the scythe and destroy it. They think they've beaten the system.
But they haven't.
Not even close. The ceiling opens. Two couples of angels descend. They have pale faces, robes like shrouds, and they are completely silent.
This is the part that really gave me chills. They don't say a single word.
They are the bureaucrats of the divine. They're the cleanup crew. Two of them pick up the scythes. The other two pick up the sleeping skeleton of death. And they just fly away. They reset the system.
And the takeaway from all this?
The narrator realizes death was only the terrible minister of the Lord's will.
So it doesn't matter if the figure of death gets drunk or becomes incompetent. The function of death is divine. You can't bribe the function.
Exactly. Even if the skeleton falters, the machinery of God ensures the job gets done. It's a total refutation of the narrator's skepticism. You can joke, you can pour champagne, but the angels will still come to collect the equipment.
So we have Cain crushed by a storm he created. We have death drunk on champagne, but then reinstated by angels. Now, let's look at the third pillar of this text, the social theology. Because the text doesn't just look at biblical history or metaphysical dinners, it looks at Paris in 1844. Specifically, it looks at the world of fashion.
Specifically, Longchamp.
Right.
This was the fashion parade of the era. During Holy Week, the wealthy would drive their carriages up and down the Champs-Élysées and show off their new dresses, their new horses. It was the place to see and be seen.
And the text is not impressed with the 1844 version of it.
No, not at all. It complains that the old Longchamp was scandalous, flashy, full of rivalries and drama. But the new Longchamp is, well, it's boring. It's bourgeois.
It says Longchamp no longer has imagination or audacity. It's become modest.
But the text links this directly to the theme of hiding. Remember Cain and his sheepskin?
Right.
The text suggests that 1844 society is hiding under changeable silks and straw hats.
Chameleons, it calls the dresses. They're blue one moment, lilac the next.
It's the vanity of objects.
Yeah.
The text spends a lot of time describing these dresses, the lace, the ribbons, but it feels like a critique of surface over substance. Just as Thorwaldson's statues tried to cover the nudity of Protestantism, these fashions try to cover the banality of modern life.
And speaking of banality and misery, we have to talk about the Mont-de-Piété, the pawn shop.
This is a really jarring transition in the text. You go from a drunken skeleton and fashion parades to a statistical report on pawn shops, but it fits the theme of judgment perfectly.
The text just lists the numbers, 25 million francs in engagements.
And it makes this powerful comparison. It talks about the billions of the British national revenue versus the tiny 3-franc loans of the poor in Paris.
It mentions that a loan of just 9 francs for 15 days costs the borrower heavily because of these commissioners.
The intermediaries. The loan sharks, basically.
Yeah.
The text critiques these commissioners who prey on the poor. It argues that the borrower pays 7 francs and 20 centimes to the commissioner, which represents, and this is the killer detail, 25 kilograms of bread.
Wow, that really puts it in perspective. That fee isn't just a number on a page. It is food taken directly out of someone's mouth.
It is. It's an economic theology.
Yeah.
It argues that usury profiting from the misery of others is a sin that society just accepts. Just as Cain couldn't wash the blood from his sheepskin, society cannot wash the guilt of this exploitation from its economy.
So what does it propose?
It calls for direct lending, removing the middleman. It's a plea for charity over profit, for justice.
It's amazing how this text weaves everything together. You have the ultimate sin of Cain, the metaphysical inevitability of death, and then the mundane, grinding, everyday sin of the pawn shop.
It establishes a worldview where every single event is part of a larger moral tapestry. The balloon crash isn't just an accident. It's a story about hubris. The Desert War isn't just politics. It's a spiritual struggle against a hostile world. And the pawn shop isn't just economics. It's a moral failing of an entire society.
Which brings us to the synthesis. What is the legacy of this work? Why does this strange little text from 1844 still matter?
Well, I think it matters because it captures the essence of what you could call romantic theology. It bridges that gap between medieval fear, the dance macabre, the angry God of the Old Testament, and modern skepticism, the narrator mocking death, the reliance on technology.
It feels like a warning.
It is. It's a warning that you can't modernize your way out of judgment. You can build steam frigates, but they will explode. You can build balloons, but they will crash. You can try to bribe death, but the angels will always intervene.
And there's that note in the text about the theater, right? About the parterre, the pit.
Yes, the pit. The text laments that there is no longer a parterre. In the old days, the pit was full of judges, people who knew the classics, who would critique the actors, who were engaged. Now the text says it's just people passing through, sleeping in the theater like it's a hotel.
Passers-by.
Exactly. And that parallels the loss of critical thinking in theology. People aren't judging the moral weight of their actions anymore. They're just passing through life, distracted by the changeable sulks of Longchamp.
Wow. Okay, so that is the landscape of Petite Pome de Nord and the Chronicles of 1844. It's a world where the storm is watching you and death is thirsty.
And where the only support, as the final rebus in the text suggests, is philosophy.
Man surrounded by pains has philosophy for support. A pretty somber ending.
Indeed.
All right, now we're going to move into our favorite segment. We've looked at the text, we've analyzed the arguments. Now let's get a little weird. It's time for thought experiments.
Disclaimer time. The following segment is for entertainment and educational purposes only. We are taking the logic of the text and stretching it to its absolute breaking point.
Experiment number 1. Let's call this the inebriated reaper scenario.
I like it. Very evocative.
The premise is this. In the poem, Death gets drunk and decides to quit her job. She wants to open a tavern. These angels intervene almost immediately to stop this from happening, but what if they didn't? What if the angels were, I don't know, busy? What if Death actually went on strike?
So we are positing a world where the metaphysical entity of Death, the minister, actually resigns from her post.
Exactly. It's not that people stop aging or getting sick or getting injured, but the event of death, the separation of soul and body, the final collection, it stops happening.
If we follow the text's logic, where death is a specific functionary, then if she quits to go pour wine, then biological cessation doesn't happen. You would have the undying decrepit.
Right. So you'd have the balloonist, Monsieur Krish, crashing into the tree, getting torn apart by the crowd, but not dying, just existing as a mangled, conscious form forever.
Thorwaldson would fall back in his chair in the theater. His heart would stop, but he wouldn't leave. He would just remain in a state of perpetual frozen collapse.
The sailors on the Princeton would be eternally in the state of being blown apart by the cannon.
It would be a theological crisis, not just a resource one. Overpopulation would be instantaneous, but it would be an overpopulation of the suffering and the broken. And think about the social theology aspect. If death is the minister of the Lord's will, as the text says, then her absence breaks the whole contract. The first storm would lose its power. You could kill Abel and Abel wouldn't die. He would just lie there, bleeding eternally.
The mark of Cain would be meaningless because there is no final punishment.
Exactly. Sin loses its ultimate consequence.
So humanity would actually have to pray for the return of the scythe. We would be begging the angels to come back down and fix this.
Precisely. We would realize that mortality is actually a mercy. We would be storming the tavern where death is serving drinks, begging her to pick up the blade again and get back to work. It completely flips the desire for immortality on its head.
That's terrifying. Okay, experiment number 2. Let's call this the moral meteorology framework.
Inspired by the first storm.
Yes. In the text, the weather, wind, rain, clouds was invented specifically to punish Cain. It didn't exist before. The physics of the planet literally changed to target him. So what if we applied that strictly to modern times?
So a world where your local weather is instantly and visibly correlated to the specific moral state of the person standing there.
Exactly. You walk outside. If you're a saint, it's 72 degrees and sunny. The blue fluid of the prelapsarian world surrounds you. But if you've just, I don't know, embezzled from the Montepiete,
you are hit by blades of water and lead. A personal hailstorm.
And it's hyper-local. It's raining on you. The person standing next to you could be perfectly dry.
This would completely destroy the concept of privacy. You couldn't hide your sin. Cain tried to hide under a sheepskin, but the stain bled through. In this world, if you see someone walking down the Champs-Élysées soaked to the bone in a personal thunderstorm, you know they did something wrong.
Shelter becomes impossible. You can't run into a Starbucks to get out of the rain because the rain is being generated by you.
It would change social segregation completely. People would avoid stormy individuals, not necessarily out of moral judgment, but just to stay dry.
Sorry, I can't hang out with you today. You're drizzling.
And meteorology becomes a branch of ethics. The weatherman isn't predicting high-pressure fronts. He's predicting crime waves. Expect heavy hail in the financial district this afternoon due to a spike in insider trading.
And the cedar tree trap from the poem becomes the ultimate danger. People offering you shelter from your own storm might be leading you into those fetid vapors. a false salvation.
It creates a world of absolute brutal transparency. The text argues that the material world reflects the spiritual. In this scenario, we just remove the delay. Judgment is instant and very, very wet.
I think I'll take my chances with regular weather. Thank you very much.
Agreed.
So what does this all mean? We've looked at a text that sees the world as a dangerous divine theater. A world where storms track murderers, where death likes fine wine, and where high fashion is just a flimsy shield against the truth.
It suggests that we are all, in a way, like that narrator at the dinner table. We are constantly trying to buy time. We are offering distractions to the inevitable.
Or we're just trying to buy death a drink.
Or are we, like Cain, desperately looking for a cedar tree that promises safety, but actually delivers a trap?
That is the question to mull over. The text ends with that rebus. Man surrounded by pains has philosophy for support. Maybe that's all we really have.
It is a fragile support, but it's probably better than a wet sheepskin.
Indeed. Thank you for listening to Talk Treatises.
Until next time.